There's a man named Chris Valentin who's a pastor at a church called Bethel Church in Redding, California, and he tells a story that I learned a lot about, and I'm going to share it with you. He talked about how as he was growing in learning in the prophetic, he thought that the purpose of prophecy was to find and reveal secrets. The goal that the prophecy revealed that which was secretive to others. And so he began to find the secrets in people's lives and then pull them in and talk to them about it, or actually minister to them in public in a church service and reveal to them the secrets that he saw, saying to them, "This is what I'm seeing, you got to fix this." So he would begin to call out the sins in people's lives, areas they'd fallen short, things they were doing that were wrong, behaviors they had that were not of God, and he began to call out those things, and he said it was a lot easier to see the dirt in someone's life than to see the gold or the treasure. I mean, after all, if you go into a field, what are you going to find more of? Dirt or good stuff? And so he saw a lot of the dirt, and he began to reveal it to people, and he'd call them out on it and say, "I see, you're having a problem with this or with that. You need to repent and get it fixed." And for 14 years, his ministry did this. And he came to a point where he began to notice that people would kind of, subtly avoid him. If they saw him coming in, they'd find a seat somewhere else. Yeah. They did. He said if he gave a message, people would go out the other doors. They didn't want to talk to him because they were, they didn't want him to see something they didn't want him to see. And after about 14 years, the church, the head pastor of that church moved into a bigger church about 2 hours away, and they had a new pastor come in. And the new pastor gave a great message on offense. If you're offended by somebody, go and reveal how they've offended you and make it right. Don't harbor resentment. Don't harbor anger. Don't harbor the offense that's been done against you by the person who's offended you. Tell them what's been happened. Confront them in a godly way and explain what's been offended and then make peace. It's a very biblical way to approach when we're offended. And he said the sermon was very powerful, and many people were moved. And the church they were in was about 200 members, 200 to 250. And they all knew each other. They were all from a very small town, and this church was a small town. Everyone knew each other. Everyone went to school together and worked together. And it was not Los Angeles. It was a very small mountain town. So they had all shared life very closely for 14 years. And he looked around, and he was surprised at how there was very few people that were lining up to talk to each other to make their offenses right. Because after the message, the pastor said, "Okay, now if you have an offense with anybody in the church today, I want you to go and stand next to that person and take care of the mess and make the offense right." So everyone started to move around, and he looked up, and he noticed that there weren't many people who were standing next to people to talk to him. There was only a few folks who looked offended. And he said, "This is a pretty happy church. Who knew?" And he looked in back of his own chair, and he saw a line of people. They met in a movie theater. He saw a line of people down the aisle and out the door. And here he was, this prophetic pastor in the church. He wasn't the head pastor, but he was the prophetic pastor of this church. They had an office for prophetic teaching and ministry, and he was the head of that. And he saw people, his people, all the way out the aisle and out the theater doors, waiting to talk to him. And he said that he met from 11:30 until after 4:30 in the afternoon, talking with his offended friends. And they said to him, "Your ministry really hurt me, really made me upset, really created in me anxiety or fear or frustration, or made me aware of all the areas that I was coming up short." And he said that after this morning of church ministry, that it really shook his foundation for what prophetic ministry should look like. Because the fruit of his ministry were people were angry and hurt and offended. no one was closer to God because of what he had done. Does that make sense? No one had come closer to God. They were just mad. And not one person said the prophetic word that you got for my life was wrong. The words were right. But the fruit was hurtful. And he talked about how he realized the prophetic ministry is not to create anxiety or hurt or condemnation in people, but rather to call them into the fullness of what God has for them. And there's a real difference there, because many think that it's just to call out the junk so people will fix the problems. When in reality, we see a picture here in 1 Corinthians 14 of how the prophetic ministry is to lead people to a better place.
Help us spread the message. Click on the donate button below or go to shermanoakspc.org/donate. Thank you.